Good morning, Sedona. It is Saturday, August 10th, 2024, and at 10 a.m. each week, you know it's time for Sedona Life with Stephen Hanks, Red Rock Country's radio magazine. We're coming to you from the beautifully overhauled KAZM Mellow Mountain Radio studio in West Sedona on 106.5 FM and 780 AM. And we also live stream this show at mellowmountainradio.com. So, folks, this is a radio show that each week explores all the fascinating aspects of life in Sedona and the Verde Valley, and occasionally throughout Arizona, and the area's intriguing personalities. And our shows are also transformed into podcasts, which can be heard on Apple and Amazon podcasts, YouTube, and Spotify. All of our Sedona Life with Stephen Hanks shows in August are being sponsored by the Sedona Heritage Museum, where you can explore the unique history of Sedona and Red Rock Country. The Sedona Heritage Museum is located in Jordan Historical Park, 735 Jordan Road in Uptown Sedona, and it's open daily from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. For more information, call 928-282-7038. That's 928-282-7038, or visit sedonamuseum.org. So if you've been a regular listener of Sedona Life with Stephen Hanks since we launched back in July, you would know that I've always been very passionate about professional sports. And back before the 2024 MLB season began, we offered an Arizona Diamondbacks preview. Well, now that we're getting into the heat of the pennant races, we're going to assess the Dbacks' chances on returning to the World Series, or at the very least, grabbing a wild card spot again in the National League. And we'll be doing that with Alex Weiner, a writer and editor for ArizonaSports.com. But that's not all, sports fans. We will also be talking about the chances for the Arizona Cardinals to make this year's NFL playoffs, and we'll be doing that with Tyler Drake, who is also a writer and editor for ArizonaSports.com. But before we talk sports, it's time, as always, for our top-of-the-show segment, Stephen's Sedona Scene, when I tell everyone in my listening audience about some terrific events happening over the upcoming week, and sometimes beyond, in Sedona and the Verde Valley. So as I mentioned, our sponsor for this month is the Sedona Heritage Museum, which on Thursdays throughout August, the museum is hosting what they call Community Days, when local residents get free admission to the museum. They'll get a chance to explore two new exhibits, including one on the life and artwork of Helen Jordan, who was one of the pioneers of Sedona. And one of my favorite things, the original McDonald's turquoise arches. For free admission in the museum, all you need to do is tell the staff and volunteers at the front desk that you're a local yokel. Well, no, not yokel, but you know what I mean. The Sedona Heritage Museum is located in Jordan Historical Park, as I mentioned, 735 Jordan Road in Uptown Sedona, and it's open daily from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. For more information, visit sedonamuseum.org. You know, folks, we often talk in Stephen's Sedona Scene about the terrific films at the Sedona International Film Festival theaters, and this coming week is no different, especially with the continuation of their Starry Night Cinema series, where they screen movies under the stars through September. This week on Tuesday, August 13th at Hillside Sedona, will feature Mamma Mia, Here We Go Again, the sequel to the big hit ABBA musical Mamma Mia. And on Wednesday, August 14th at the Wild Resort and Spa, the featured film will be This Is It, highlighting Michael Jackson's 2009 concert tour. Tickets are $7, and kids 12 and under get in free. For tickets and info, go to SedonaFilmFestival.com. But the film I really wanted to tell folks about is the showing on August 11th and 12th, that's Sunday and Monday, of the classic 1962 film Lawrence of Arabia, as part of the nationwide celebration of the 100th anniversary of Columbia Pictures. Ryan, I'll be seeing this film again on the 12th because, as it happens, one of the woman warriors' favorite movies is Lawrence of Arabia. So we're going to be camping out in Mary D. Fisher Theater and watching this 7-time Academy Award winning fantastic film that, if you've never seen it, you should definitely see. So book your tickets for the Mary D. Fisher Theater on August 11th and 12th, $12 or $9 for film festival members at SedonaFilmFestival.com. So now it's time to talk baseball, probably my favorite thing in life other than politics, as you know. And my first guest today is Alex Weiner, who's a web editor and writer for ArizonaSports.com and KTAR.com and KTAR 92.3 FM in Glendale and Phoenix. Alex covers the Arizona Diamondbacks games for the sports station's website and has experience covering the Arizona Cardinals and Arizona State athletics. Weiner grew up in Los Angeles, California before moving to the Valley in 2017 to attend ASU as a sports journalism major. A little bit like my background, Alex. I worked on my school paper, and my first job in sports journalism was as an intern at the late great Sport magazine. You may be too young to remember that publication, but it was actually predated Sports Illustrated. Anyway, so Alex, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me. Good morning.
Good morning. And so, okay, so we're talking about the Diamondbacks exactly at the right time. When the season started, it was almost like they were in a little bit of a postseason World Series hangover. They were very shaky the first half of the year. But since the All-Star break and the trade deadline, they've been on fire. And now they're not only in contention for one of those 3 National League wildcard spots, but they're not that far behind the Dodgers. And so I guess my first question to you would be, since you're following them so closely, what do you think accounts for the turnaround from the way they were playing early in the year?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of factors that go into sort of this difference. Early in the season, you mentioned they had a long postseason run last year, but they got hit pretty hard by injuries really quickly. Eduardo Rodriguez in spring training goes down. Paul Sewald goes down at the end of spring training. They lose Merrill Kelly after just 4 starts. Perdomo and Alec Thomas both go on the IL after only a week of game, like within the first week of the season. So it just felt like one after another, this team was going to be tested as far as its depth. And you kind of pair that with some underperformance, especially offensively, from guys who they were counting on, like Eugenio Suarez, who came in an off-season trade, and Corbin Carroll, who had such a historic rookie season that, for them, it was just about kind of hanging around, treading water. That phrase was used a bunch, and then, getting everybody back and then going on a run here. And since the start of really July, it goes back into June a little bit, but really since the start of July, this offense has really, really shown a lot of power. Ketel Marte continues to have sort of an MVP, contending season. And, guys like Suarez have really turned it around and have helped this team now become the leading scorer in all of baseball. And, you pair an offense that has, really picked it up with a pitching staff that has at least held its own with a lot of the injuries that it's had. And, they've just been able to kind of stack up series wins, and that kind of helps you consistently climb up the rankings.
Yeah, Marte is really impressive. As a matter of fact, I agree with you about the MVP contention. If it wasn't for Ohtani, he might be the leading contender for that. Do you think?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think he and Ohtani right now would be 1 and 2. With Shohei, it's an interesting case because he's just a designated hitter this year, but he has been the best hitter in the National League, while Ketel has shown a lot of value defensively, as well as being a tremendous hitter this season. So it's interesting that, this could potentially be the race to watch out for as these two teams compete to try to win the National League West here because it's only a 3.5 game difference at this point.
Yeah. So what's your take on Corbin Carroll's season? I was a little surprised given how great he was last year. And look, he was a rookie, right? Last year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the sophomore jinx is a little bit of a cliche and it doesn't happen to everybody. But so what's your take on Corbin Carroll's season and he's picked it up a lot lately. What do you think's going on with him this year?
Yeah, he talked about earlier in the season, making some adjustments. The league adjusts to you, you adjust to it, and that's part of the game as a younger player. He felt like his swing path became too flat, and it was causing him to pop the ball up a lot, which is what we've seen, and just not being able to drive the ball. And as he's continued to work hard, and that's sort of been what everybody has said about him, is how hard he's been trying to get this thing righted. And we still see some pop-ups here and there, and that's certainly it certainly doesn't quite look exactly like it did last year, but it's looking a lot closer, especially with the power. He's got 7 home runs in his last 24 games. That's much more like it, considering he went months without hitting a home run earlier in the season. So they're getting a closer version of what they got last year, but it's still not quite the pencil him in, batting leadoff every single game, righties or lefties, and know what to expect. So
right.
It's been a little bit of a tough year for him, and sophomore slump. I know that gets thrown around, but I think it's just making adjustments as the league adjusts to you, and now he continues to try to make those adjustments to be a productive player down the stretch.
Yeah, so let's talk about these real key injuries that they've gotten lately and what the impact might be. So we've got Christian Walker, they're really great first baseman, has an oblique. He's got 23 home runs and 71 RBIs as he went into that injury. Catcher Gabriel Moreno, who was having a fabulous year, has suffered a groin injury. Do you know much about the seriousness of these? I know they're on the 10-day injury list. How do you think that's going to impact them, in the next couple of weeks and beyond?
I'll start with Walker. Afterwards, it was said that he was a grade 1 strain, and he felt it was, possible he could be back potentially in 3 weeks after he got injured. And he has started some light swings. He might pick up a bat here next week. So there's some healing there. But I guess one of the fortunate, if you want to call it that, parts of the injury was it happened right before the trade deadline. And so they were able to go out and get Josh Bell.
Exactly,
to fill the gap a little bit there and ease the blow, because Walker is such a huge part of this team. He's been the cleanup hitter pretty much every single game this season. He didn't miss a single game when he went down, and he didn't start a couple of those games, but he played in every single one of their games. So just having that stability over at first base defensively, as well as the power, that obviously has a huge impact. But now having Bell, that kind of helps them bridge the gap a little bit there. With Moreno, that one's a little bit less clear. That just happened on Monday. He's going to get second opinions on the severity of it. He had some imaging done, but Torey Lovello yesterday told reporters that it's looking like it'll be several weeks. He didn't give an exact time frame. He said he was optimistic that he'll come back this season, but we don't entirely know what that exact timetable will look like. So that's going to put the onus on backup Jose Herrera to fill in, as well as Adrian Del Castillo, who just came up and made his major league debut this week.
Yeah, those groin injuries can be so tough to predict how long the recovery time is going to be. I remember last year on the Mets, Starling Marte actually 2 years ago, he had a groin injury that never really healed, and he was suffering with it last year. So hopefully for Moreno and Dbacks fans, this particular groin injury isn't gonna last through the rest of the year and maybe the postseason. So I'm sure all the Diamondback fans in Sedona and the Verde Valley hope that he gets back on the field as soon as possible. So let's talk about the pitching staff. I know they're getting Merrill Kelly back. They've been holding their own for the year. Brandon Pfaadt has been really holding up the rotation while Zach Gallen was out. What's your read on the rotation and how things look till the end of the year?
Yeah, I mean, it's possible that Merrill Kelly comes back even on Sunday, that they have a big TBA listed as their probable on Sunday. It lines up after.
That's what they all say.
Have start on Tuesday. Exactly.
Yeah.
One of those poorly kept secrets, I
right.
suppose. So it lines up pretty well for him to potentially make his debut then, even if it hasn't been announced yet. So at that point, for the first time all year, we're going to be able to see what that 5-man rotation can look like with Gallen, Kelly, Rodriguez, Jordan Montgomery, and Brandon Pfaadt, the 5 that they assembled at the start of the year when they brought in Montgomery. It hasn't been the smoothest of years for everybody in there. Obviously, with Montgomery, he's had definitely his struggles. He has called it before the hardest season of his career. He's shown some more positive signs the last couple of outings, but that's, he hasn't really stacked up a ton of great starts together. Pfaadt has been unbelievably useful just as somebody to
eat up innings.
Get you 6. Yeah, you get him out there and he's going to get you 6. That's what his entire season has been, and it's been really, really impactful considering all the injuries. And then Ryan Nelson has been really excellent as far as just like filling in and being able to eat those innings. He leads the team in innings since the start of July, and so it'll be interesting to see what they do with him when they have their 5-man rotation, and whether he's in it, whether he's not in it, whether they give him a different role, whether they put him back in AAA to keep him stretched out. I'm not entirely sure what the strategy is going to be there with him, but he's making it a pretty difficult decision.
You think they would go to a 6-man just to save some of the arms going down the stretch?
I'm not so sure they would go 6-man. Their assistant general manager, Mike Fitzgerald, went on Arizona Sports yesterday and was asked about that. It didn't seem like something they were terribly interested in doing.
Right.
It's possible maybe you keep Nelson up there just in case. I mean, you have a couple guys coming back from shoulder injuries, and Montgomery's been a little bit shaky, but obviously I think you'd like to keep him stretched out if you want him for depth. So yeah, I'm not entirely sure what they do with that. At the beginning of the year, it seemed pretty obvious. That's like, all right, these are our 5 guys, and that's who we're going to go with. But maybe Nelson has played himself into a bigger role, whether it's rotation, bullpen. I'm not entirely sure.
Cool. So as we all know, going down the stretch in any baseball season these days, and then also in the postseason, the bullpen is actually the key unit on the team. And the Diamondbacks showed that last year when they, really turned it on with the bullpen after they picked up Paul Sewald. And he did a great job. A former Met, by the way. He didn't pitch as well for us, but I'm not going to complain. So Sewald has 16 saves, but he's been shaky at times. There's been talk about him being taken out of the closer role. The Diamondbacks bullpen as a whole has been ranking below average for the season. Team relief ERA ranks 25th the last I looked, but they picked up a couple of guys at the trade deadline, as a few teams tried to do that are in the race. Give me your take on where Sewald's at and what you're looking at with the bullpen down the stretch.
Sure. So the bullpen's in an interesting spot because Sewald was taken out of the closer's role last weekend, and they've been sort of going by matchups, by committee. You saw Ryan Thompson get a few opportunities. AJ Puck came in and saved a game, and then Justin Martinez has picked up a couple of saves too. So they're kind of navigating through these waters that maybe you wouldn't ideally have to do if you had a set closer, but just with the struggles that Sewald had in July, they're giving him a kind of a breather, step back, and try to figure some things out. They're still going to need Paul Sewald. They're going to need everybody in that bullpen. And I think best case scenario for them is that Sewald figures it out, whether it's a delivery issue or whatever it is, and kind of reclaims that title so that they can build out games from the 9th inning and forward like Torey Lovullo likes to do. But yeah, for now they have a lot of different options to put back in there, and that's sort of what they're going to have to do, whether it's Ryan Thompson or Puck, who's been quite good since they got him at the trade deadline, or even Justin Martinez, who's only 23 years old and has probably the best stuff in the bullpen, but is a young pitcher and will have a little volatility at times.
Yeah, you brought up Torey Lovullo, and I've got to say, I don't follow the Dbacks like super closely like I do my team, and obviously like you do, but Lovello impresses me as a really terrific manager, unless I'm missing something. And especially this year, when any team comes off a World Series appearance and gets off to a shaky start like they did this year, that's a real challenge for a manager. And he seems to have navigated through it to get them to the point where they're actually in contention in the Western Division. What is it about Torey Lovullo that makes him so good for that team?
I think it's how he handles the players and how comfortable he makes the players feel in that clubhouse. And he's been branded as a players manager before, and I think just the culture that is set in there kind of allows the team to kind of reach its potential in that sense. And so when things aren't going great, and there have been years in the past where certainly it got away from them. But we saw this last year when they got off that amazing start, and then they really slowed down in the middle of the summer.
Right.
Just sort of that composure to rebound and then push for that playoff spot towards the end of the year. It showed a lot about the clubhouse culture, but also a lot about how these players are managed. And this year, when they started off, as poorly as they did, given all the injuries and some underperformance, they kind of kept their head above the water, and now it allows them to push forward because they weren't completely out of it. And so I think that's a testament to how Torey has been able to kind of run this club from a culture perspective, and I think that means a lot.
Yeah. Have there been any big surprises for you on the team this year, either positive or negative? I know we talked about Corbin Carroll having a little shaky year and Seawald's up and down season, but anything like stand out to you as a surprise one way or the other that you didn't expect?
I mean, obviously Corbin's probably the biggest one. I would say Jordan Montgomery would be a little bit of a surprise on the negative front.
Right.
But positive-wise, I don't know if it's a surprise what Jake McCarthy is doing, but I think it's noteworthy, given the struggles to Corbin and with Alex being gone for so long, and Jake McCarthy has really stepped up as far as providing them sort of like a very high caliber everyday outfielder. Last night he had 3 hits again. His OPS is right around 800 for the season, and after last year where he started off slowly, got sent down to the minor leagues, and then came back up and was useful for them, but not quite to this level. I think this is a very welcome sight for the team. And I think Jock Peterson also is
I forgot about Jock. He's been a great addition to that squad.
Absolutely. And maybe not totally surprised because he's hit throughout his career, but this has been another level for him, and they put him in a platoon role to face right-handed pitching, which is what he's crushed throughout his career. And he's just been so consistent as an at-bat for them, and now adding some more power to it. So I think that addition can't be overstated, how important it was to keep this lineup afloat.
So if you were going to make a prediction, and I know you cover the team every day, so you may not be the most objective, although I'm sure you always try to be as a journalist. What's your take on how far you think this team can go this year in the playoffs?
That's the thing, right? I mean, last year they proved that if you could just get in, then you can kind of blow away everybody's expectations. And right now they're in a playoff spot. As of Friday morning, they're in the second wild card, a game back of the Padres for the first wild card, only 3.5 back of the division. I think that the division might be tough just because, it's 3.5 games against the Dodgers team that's just about to get Mookie Betts back.
Right.
We'll see, but I think it could be a fun race, and that's not something we've had in the National League West a whole lot, and I think that could be that can lead to some terrific baseball down the stretch if the Padres and the Diamondbacks are both, coming for the big bad Dodgers. And if the Diamondbacks get in the postseason with a healthier rotation, Gallen, Kelly, and whomever, Bott, Rodriguez, whoever they want, I think that they could be as dangerous as anybody in there to potentially defend their National League crown.
Well, if you get in, I hope the Mets are the third team. So, although the Padres
they are right now.
I know we went ahead of the. I'm shocked at what's going on with the Braves, but one thing about the San Diego Padres is they're pretty much on fire like you guys are. I'm assuming that that both teams will come back down to earth a little bit. So it's going to be a great race going down the stretch here.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the Padres and Diamondbacks have both been the best teams in baseball since the start of July. It feels like, oh, the Diamondbacks won today. Let's see where they are in the standings.
Yep.
Oh, the Padres also won today, and that's kind of felt like almost every single day. So yeah, maybe there's some coming back down to earth a little bit, but both those teams are plenty talented, and they should at least give the Dodgers a little bit of stress going down the stretch here.
Yeah, well, it is definitely scoreboard watching time, which is always one of the great times of the baseball season, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, before we leave, any info you want to impart that our fans who follow the team should know about before we leave?
Just, big series against the Phillies this weekend, and then another, a big road trip, and then the Dodgers and the Mets come back at the end of the month. And so there's a lot of, great series to keep an eye on. So just tune to Arizona Sports, and we'll have all things Diamondbacks for you there.
Yeah, needless to say, I might be in the stands when the Mets come to town later in the month. So I'll look for you up in the press box somewhere.
That sounds great.
All right. Alex, thanks so much. My guest has been Alex Weiner of ArizonaSports.com, giving us all his expertise on the Arizona Diamondbacks as we head into playoff time. Alex, thanks so much for being my guest today on Sedona Life with Stephen Hanks.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right. Thank you. So now I want to give a shout out to our sponsor for the month of August, which is the Sedona Heritage Museum, which invites visitors from Sedona across the country and around the world to explore the unique history of Red Rock Country. At the Sedona Heritage Museum, you can dive into exhibits about local art history, pop culture, film history, and so much more. The Sedona Heritage Museum is located in Jordan Historical Park, 735 Jordan Road in Uptown Sedona, and it is open daily from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. For more information, call 928-282-7038. That's 928-282-7038, or visit sedonamuseum.org. Well, we are back with Sedona Life with Stephen Hanks, and now it's time to talk Arizona Cardinals football. And before I introduce my guest, who's going to fill us in on what's going on with the Cardinals during training camp and preview of the season, tell you a little bit about this team. One of the things that impressed me in going through, the research of their season is that even though this was a 4-13 team last year, they were the only team in the NFL to have rookies combined for 2,000 or more snaps on offense and 2,000 or more snaps on defense. And we're gonna talk a little bit about the last couple of years of the draft class for the Cardinals. I'm sure Tyler knows a lot about that. They also. One of the reasons that they were 4-13 is, well, the main reason was their quarterback, Kyler Murray, was hurt for a good part of the beginning of the season. But also, they had an extremely tough schedule. They had the league's second toughest schedule with 8 games versus playoff teams, and they actually had the lead in 14 of the 17 games they played, which is pretty. And actually, I remember, watching the coverage on the NFL Network of highlights, and it was just amazing how the Cardinals would get into leads in games, and they just sort of petered out at the end. So that accounted for a lot of their record. And Tyler Drake, my guest, is going to tell us a little bit about why that happened and what he thinks is going to happen this year. So Tyler has been on the Cardinals beat for Arizona Sports and KTAR News 92.3 FM since 2021, and has been an editor and writer at the station since 2017. He also co-hosts Arizona Sports Cardinals Corner podcast and has covered the Phoenix Open, the Dbacks, and ASU football and basketball. Tyler, welcome to Sedona Life with Stephen Hanks.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm glad you're here. So as I said, last year the team was 4-13 under a first-year coach, Jonathan Gannon, mainly due to Kyler Murray missing a lot of action in the first 3 months. Now, a lot of pundits feel that they were much better than their record last year. And coming into this season, I've actually seen some so-called NFL experts predicting that they could win as many as 9 games. Although one person I saw predicting the game-by-game outcomes had the Cardinals beating my New York Jets, which is definitely not going to be happening. So I just want to tell you that. Although it will be a home game for Cardinals. So anyway, so you're in training camp. You're seeing what's going on. What's your read on how the Cardinals are going to do this year? And then we'll get into specifics.
Yeah. So I think overarching, this team definitely has improved not only from a talent standpoint, but just from a culture and foundation standpoint. And I heard you say, Kyler Murray missing most of the season last year. Yeah, that was a huge, huge part of why they only won 4 games. But also, I think a big part of that, too, was new regime. You're making up for a lot of the mistakes that the old regime kind of left for you to pick up. So, obviously, they're still dealing with that a little bit with some of the dead money that they've got to pay still from the previous regime. But they kind of just cleaned house and started rebuilding last year, and now I think the rebuild has accelerated a bit entering training camp. Like I said, there's a lot more talent than there was in year 1 under Jonathan Gannon and Monty Ossenfort, and now it's just putting these games together and being able to win those close games now. And I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility at all for them to win 9 games. I think doubling the win total is probably the floor is what I'm setting for this team right now. I think that should be a given, and then you win a couple more games and maybe squeak into a wild card spot. But definitely there's the change. There's definitely a change going on in the desert down here, and it's really impressive just seeing kind of the culture side of things and how much that has just changed. There's no more off the field distractions. Obviously, Budda Baker's still in a contract year. James Conner's in a contract year. There's guys that are in contract years, but they're not letting that really impact their continued growth with the team, with the coaching staff, with their teammates. So you can tell that they're doing things the right way, and I think that's been something that had been missing for a while with this organization, and you're starting to see kind of that just back to the basics, traditional football, and go from there and see how the wins stack up.
Right. I mentioned Jonathan Gannon. Last year he was a first-year coach. They signed him to a 5-year deal last February, and he's a rookie. He's a first-year coach who had to lead the 3rd youngest team in the NFL. And so I want to talk to you about 2 things. One, obviously, well, it shouldn't be obvious, but usually the second year of a new coach, it's going to be a little bit more comfortable. The players are going to be more used to him. I'd like you to tell us a little bit about what you feel the interaction between Gannon and the team is, but also this thing about how young the Cardinals are. They had a really good draft class last year, and this year's draft class, I mean, they've got like 6 or 7 guys, according to the depth chart, that may make the team out of that draft unless they fall off when we get down to the last preseason game. So tell me your take on Gannon and what you're seeing from this young draft class that they had this season.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that stands out with Gannon is just how energized and how energetic he really is. I mean, every day he walks in, you can tell he's ready to go. He's been ready to go. He really brings a new kind of look to the head coaching position with the Cardinals. Obviously, I was here when Cliff Kingsbury was still around, and just a different kind of feeling. He's very much JG is very much team first. He's really about teaching. He's really about helping guys learn and helping them, give them all the tools that they can possibly have to get to the next level of their performance. Obviously, I think that goes across the board in the NFL, but I think the way that Gannon goes about it is just a little more, he's obviously the coach, but I think he's really relating to the guys around him. He's got 5 buckets. One of that is just being accountable and being a team first kind of guy. And I think that really stands out to these guys, especially the people that have stuck around, the holdovers from the previous regime. Kyler Murray talks about it a lot. Like he's very close with Gannon, it seems like, and they've only been together for, a year, and they've only been on the field together for a handful of games. So I think that alone, seeing kind of Kyler's growth with his head coach and just kind of seeing a different Kyler, I think that just shows you a lot from the head coach and what he's bringing to the table. Everybody, I mean, it's when you talk to people in the locker room now, everyone kind of says the same thing when you ask about the team and the culture. It's, I'm playing for the guy beside me. This is our thing. Like, we're taking that next step. And you can really feel that going into year 2, all these guys have a better idea of what's going on, and the confidence that Gannon, he has confidence already, but you can sense there's even more confidence that he knows the guys around him know what they're doing now, even the coaching staff. He kept the entire coaching staff from last year just to make sure the continuity is there. And I think that's huge in continuing to develop this team and potentially streamlining this rebuild into something that can be formidable in the next couple of years. Yeah,
one of the things that happens in all sports, doesn't matter if it's football or baseball, when you've got a young team with rookies or second-year players who have talent, a lot of times those teams are hard to predict what they're going to do because you don't know how those players are going to develop in season. A lot of teams turn it on in the second half of seasons because their young players are more comfortable and their full potential is coming out. And that could be the case with the Cardinals, certainly if they're good enough to win 9 games. So you've got, these draft picks that they had, a slew of draft picks. Marvin Harrison Jr. at wide receiver, Troy Benson at running back, Max Melton at cornerback, Trey Benson as a potential backup quarterback. I mean, Darius Robinson on the defensive line. What have you seen from this draft class so far in training camp? How many of you do you think are going to make an impact?
I think there's going to be a lot, and like you mentioned earlier, they played a lot of rookies last year because that was a necessity because they didn't have the talent really to roll out some of these older veterans. We weren't trying to pay, we're trying to rebuild the bank, the cap space instead of continuing to go down the tunnel with that. But yeah, I would say there's going to be quite a few rookies that are getting meaningful time. Obviously, Marvin Harrison Jr. is their wide receiver 1. Darius Robinson, I think, is only a matter of a time before he's a starter. That very well could be week 1 into week 2. I mean, he's can play about every position on the defensive line, and looks like he's getting it. Max Melton is right in the mix for a starting cornerback role. Trey Benson is likely going to be the RB2, or if not the RB3, right behind Amari DeMercado. But right now he's listed as RB2, so that's a good sign for him. And yeah, there's a lot of Tip Ryman. He's probably likely their tight end 2 or tight end 3 alongside Elijah Higgins and Trey McBride. So there's a lot of guys, a lot of young guys who are definitely going to get playing time and probably earn quite a few starts this year, just like they did last year. And I think what everybody's kind of banking on is these rookies from last year who got so much experience are going to be able to take a bigger jump than maybe originally expected because of how many snaps they got. And obviously it really sucks that they lost B.J. Ojulari because he was getting a lot of reps last year and really came on towards the end of the year. I think he ended up with 4 sacks, was I think second or third on the team there, and really looked like he was coming into his own the second year into training camp. He looked noticeably different. He looked like he was one of their stars on the line in the pass rushing department, and him going down with the torn ACL really throws a wrench in their plan. But he definitely was that's just an example of kind of the guys that really they're banking on to take that jump. Dante Stills played a ton, and he's got to climb up the depth chart a little bit because there's some guys ahead of him, I would say, but he's going to get a lot of work too. So they definitely are very much happy to play their young starters, and I think it also helps with just their development of these players. They're getting them into their system young and being able to teach them up how they want them to play. They're not coming from another team, or if they are coming from another team, it hasn't been that long to where they can kind of drill in their way, their order of operations. And from there, it's just even more cohesive moving forward, and you can get these younger players in the game without having such a liability like other teams could potentially have with their rookies.
Yeah. One of the things that was really impressive about the Cardinals last year, and this almost sounds counterintuitive for a 4-13 team, but one of the best rushing attacks in the NFL last year, ranked fourth in rushing yards, second in rushing average. They had 4 games with 200-plus rushing yards. And it was the 2023 season was just the second time since 1970, which was the year the New York Jets won the Super Bowl, by the way. And the first time in 44 years that the Cardinals finished a year ranked in the top 5 in NFL in rushing yards, which was they were third in 1979. So what that tells you, number one, not only that they have really good running backs, but for a team with that kind of record, they obviously had a really good offensive line. So what are you seeing from that unit this season coming in?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'd say the Cardinals were probably the best team the last couple of weeks on the ground. They really turned it on. And, yeah, the offensive line, obviously they lost DJ Humphries, but they have Paris Johnson. He's moving over to left tackle. They brought in Jonah Williams through free agency. He was one of their more important signings, I should say, 3-year deal, I believe, and that has been something that really Monty hadn't been handing out in his first year, so a couple 3-year deals this year. But, yeah, then from there you've got Will Hernandez at right guard. Left guard, it's probably going to be Evan Brown, and then at center it's Yelda Froholt. And I think the big thing with this unit is you really just had to figure out what was going to happen at left guard. I think it was pretty solidified who you had in your starting lineup, and you've got Kelvin Beachum right there who could be a swing tackle, could come in and start at tackle if need be. So not only do they have a solid starting lineup, in my opinion, they also have a lot of depth. John Gaines, the second, is looking like he's really going to be an important piece. He can play all 3 interior roles. So there's some depth that I think they didn't have last year. And honestly, I think just the talent level is increased. Evan Brown, he really can play left guard or center. So if something were to happen with Froholt or if they needed to get another look, he could easily slide in and do that. He actually already did that in training camp when Froholt went down for a little bit. But, yeah, it's definitely taken another step forward from last year, in my opinion, just because of the depth. And like I said, it just feels a lot more solidified than it did last year.
Yeah. Now, of course, if Kyler Murray is healthy, which we all hope he is the whole season, and you have Marvin Harrison Jr., and if he reaches the potential that everybody thinks he has, the running game isn't going to be as prominent. I mean, they had to run last year with backup quarterbacks. So are you seeing that the team's going to throw a lot more this season?
I think there's definitely going to be an element of that, but I still think at the end of the day they really want to run the ball. I think if you look at the draft class, they went and got Tip Ryman, they went and got Isaiah Adams, 2 guys who love to run block and are maulers in that side of the game. So I really do believe that it's still going to be a run-first offense. And then you've got the dangerous side of the passing attack with Kyler back there, Marvin Harrison Jr., Trey McBride, Michael Wilson, Greg Dortch. I mean, you could throw Elijah Higgins in there. You could throw Tip Ryman in there. I mean, James Conner, Trey Benson. There's a lot of different weapons that he can use now. And I think the big thing that I'm going to be watching is the down-the-field shots. I think that's going to improve. I think having a guy like Marvin, having a legit wide receiver 1 is going to do wonders for just how the offense rolls as a whole, but I still do think they are very much going to want to ground and pound as much as they can and then probably take a shot over the top, and that's how they're going to beat you.
Yeah, so what about James Conner going into a walk year? He's obviously a very popular player and a great one. Fans love him. He's been solid. What's your take on his situation? Is he going to stay, or you think it's not possible if he has another great year?
I think they would like to have him stick around. Obviously, money's going to be a big thing of that, and seeing potentially what Trey Benson does could also throw some more, not a wrench, but could also make that a little more interesting too. But I would say if they're looking just from what he brings to the table from a team side of things, like they should be extending him now because like a Budda Baker, he's very much the heart and soul he's part of the heart and soul of that offense. I would honestly put Kyler in that conversation too. But Connor definitely, he checks all the boxes that they want, that they need, that they ask for. I mean, he's a very much team-first player, wants everybody around him to be better. And yeah, he's just about his business. I think they've all talked very highly of him. Gannon even said, like, if anybody's going to beat Father Time, it's probably going to be James Conner just because of the work he puts in away from the field. So I think if the contract, the money, and everything could work out the way where it doesn't really kill the team, I could definitely see them reuniting for a couple more years. But obviously, yeah, Trey Benson, if he comes on and is looking like a force, that maybe could push the issue of, hey, maybe we don't need to re-sign him. But I would say just from what he brings in the locker room and off the field, he definitely deserves to stick around another year or two for sure.
Yeah, and when you have a young team like this, you want those veterans that are well respected in the locker room to stick around for a while. You know, I imagine that they would, if the money is right for both sides, I'm sure he'll be there. So let's talk a little bit about like your prognostication for the season in general, if it isn't too early to do that. So let's start with the NFC. I mean, what's your take on who you're looking at to be possibly the playoff teams at the end of the year?
Oh, okay. Well, I think just from NFC West side of things, I'm going to say Niners are probably going to be the top team. I just, even with the Brandon Ayuk situation going on, they just seem like they're the gold standard right now. From there, I think it's going to be really interesting. I think, you know, the Lions are obviously going to be in the mix. I think Green Bay is probably going to be in the mix somehow. The NFC
South seems like, you know, if the Cardinals win 9 games in the NFC, they could, you know, squeeze a playoff spot.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because I think from a wild card standpoint, it's going to fall off after these divisional, whoever wins the division. So there's definitely, yeah, like you said, there's definitely a lot of teams that I'm not expecting to do as well. And I think the one thing too is there's a stat that has been a consistent trend for years now where 4 teams that didn't make the playoffs the year before will end up making it, and that'll mean 4 players or 4 teams that were there the year before weren't going to make it.
Right.
So that's something I'm kind of looking at, and I think it could be even higher than that. To be honest, I think there's just a lot of unknown beyond, you know, the main teams I think everybody's looking at right now. So it's definitely not out of the question at all for them to squeeze into a wild card spot. I think what's going to happen with the Cardinals is they're going to go as far as their defense is going to take them. I think with BJ going down, that really impacts what they wanted to do in the pass rushing side of things. If their cornerbacks can really play up to where they think they can, that's going to help alleviate some of that pass rushing, deficit, and that could really help add a couple more wins there, maybe get to double digits. But it's really going to come down to how much can this defense really come together and play over a full season and really not hinder the offense. And I'm not trying to knock the defense at all, but I think the offense, everybody's expecting a lot of big things, and if not, that's a failure on their part. But on the defensive side, it's how high can you get to, like, what is your ceiling going to be? And I think in year 2, it's going to take a huge step forward. They've got a lot of talent, like I said, from free agency in the draft, but again, that was one of their weak spots last year. So everyone's going to be watching that side of things. So improving the defense could easily add 2 or 3 more wins to the win total.
Yeah, and also, you know, even though the 49ers are the favorite, you know, to even get to the Super Bowl this year, and they're in the Cardinals division, the Rams and the Seahawks, who the Cardinals play twice. I don't know if the Rams and the Seahawks are all that powerful. I mean, if the Cardinals improve, you know, those are winnable games this season, don't you think?
Yeah, definitely. I do, especially when you look at what the Rams got going on. They lost Donald. Obviously, Sean McVay's still there, but losing a guy like Aaron Donald's definitely going to have, I think, more teams perked up when they go to town against the Rams, knowing that they don't have to deal with the game record that was Aaron Donald. And then in Seattle, you've got a lot of change. I mean, head coaching change, and I think that's the big one. So, it's going to be very interesting to see how the division shakes out. But it's just such a weird division. Seattle, whenever the Cardinals play Seattle, I always expect a weird game of something weird to happen in that game. So, there's definitely potential for them to really take hold of that side of the division. And if they could still one from the Niners, I think that would be a huge acknowledgement of where they're going right now.
Yeah. So one thing that's been going on that I wanted to get your take on, these quarterback contracts. You know, Jordan Love was fantastic last year. I think a lot of people thought he was really good, and that obviously was the reason why the Packers thought they could let Aaron Rodgers go. But I think Jordan Love's progress, and especially the way he played in the playoffs, shocked everybody. But what really, I think, shocked everybody is the contract that he got recently, and what some of the other contracts for the quarterbacks are. And we're still waiting on Dak Prescott with the Cowboys, who is probably going to want like huge dollars from what he saw Jordan Love and some of the other guys get. What's your take on these contracts for the quarterbacks? Why do you think it's happening now? And is it out of control?
I mean, I think what I can say is look at last year with the Cardinals. I mean, they didn't have a starting quarterback until week 10, and you could clearly see that. Like they were a rudderless ship without Kyler there, and that's nothing against Josh Dobbs and Clayton Tune, who came in as well, but just that side of things, I can understand why people are throwing money at guys. The Jordan Love contract, I personally was like, that's a lot of money for a guy who I think hasn't really shown that much. But like I just said, you got to have a franchise quarterback on your roster. So there's that fear of not having a guy and then getting stuck with a second or third stringer for a couple of years while you're trying to bridge the gap and maybe get a guy in a draft. So, and then you've got to think from there, how do you build him up into being a starting caliber NFL quarterback? I think from the Cardinals side of things, the Kyler Murray deal is looking incredible. I mean, that was one of the things that everybody talked about, how ridiculous it was. I know that the study clause was thrown in there, which was next thrown out. And I can tell you right now, that's probably the farthest thing from his mind, because he definitely looks like a guy who is in the building every day and working every day. And I'm not saying he wasn't before, but clearly there's a change there. But yeah, I mean, his contract looks incredible compared to everybody else's. And that was always a pressure point, I think, for a lot of Cardinals fans, of like, why would you pay this guy when he hasn't really done anything? And like I said, I think it goes back to, you've got to have somebody at the helm who can go out there and win a game if need be. And Kyler definitely fits that billing. So, yeah, it's just going to keep skyrocketing. I think Dak has done a little more than Jordan Love, in my opinion. So he's definitely going to get paid. And I think that historic money is going to just continue to shoot up. And yeah, I think everybody out in Arizona is just going to keep smiling because Kyler has got a really good deal in terms of quarterback contracts now.
Yeah, as long as he doesn't try to renegotiate if he has a great year this year.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm surprised Aaron Rodgers isn't walking into Woody Johnson at the Jets and asking for a new 5-year deal at this point after what he saw Jordan. I'm a lot older than you. So I remember, like, I was 13 years old when the Jets won Super Bowl III, and I shouldn't be dating myself like that. But I remember that the rule of thumb, and you probably have heard this, the rule of thumb in the National Football League was that it took 4 to 5 years for a quarterback to develop in the NFL. And even hotshots out of college, Namath was an anomaly, but most great quarterbacks that came out of college that got into the NFL sat on the bench for 3 to 5 years before they became starters, because they had to learn the craft. So it's just incredible how these guys are stepping right in and doing what they're doing.
Yeah, C.J. Stroud especially. That was a fun season to watch just on that side of things, because he really came in and really went after it. And like you said, I mean, that used to be the thing. I mean, Aaron Rodgers sat behind Favre for years, and that's why I think he was as good as he was because he got that extra time to kind of fine-tune his craft. But, yeah, it's a different era, and I think, guys, it's go time now. As soon as you break into the league, like, you better be ready to go.
So I'm getting the signal that I've got to wind things down. Before I let you go, what's going to be your biggest surprise of the season this year for the Cardinals?
Oh, biggest surprise! I think it's going to be who's going to take the lead as the sacks leader in the pass rushing department. Is it going to be a Dennis Gardeck? Is it going to be a Zaven Collins? Is it going to be somebody maybe we're not even thinking about as a pass rusher, maybe a Mac Wilson Sr. who can play edge and who can play inside? It's going to be really interesting. I think that's going to be the big surprise, is really who is going to be that guy. And I think the other thing, too, is that they shock some people and win some games that a lot of people don't have them winning, and they make it an easy wild card berth instead of a squeak in at the last second kind of deal.
Right. Well, listen, I really appreciate your insights today, and I appreciate you coming on the show. So thanks very much for being on Sedona Life with Stephen Hanks today. And I hope I have you on again.
Oh, yeah, no problem. Yep, just let me know, and I'll be back.
All right, thanks. That is Tyler Drake from ArizonaSports.com talking about the Arizona Cardinals. And I want to also thank my previous guest, Alex Weiner, who talked about the Diamondbacks, also from ArizonaSports.com. And I also want to give special thanks to my show sponsor for the month of August, the Sedona Heritage Museum, where you can explore the unique history of Sedona and Red Rock Country. The Sedona Heritage Museum is located in Jordan Historical Park, 735 Jordan Road in Uptown Sedona, and it's open daily from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. For more information, visit sedonamuseum.org. Thanks always to my tremendous producer in the booth, Ryan Thompson, who after the show, as always, will send me the audio that we transform into a podcast version of Sedona Life with Stephen Hanks that you can listen to anytime on Apple and Amazon Podcasts, YouTube, and Spotify. You can also find Sedona Life with Stephen Hanks on Facebook. And please email me with comments and questions to stephen@mellowmountainradio.com. Join us again next Saturday morning from 10 to 11 a.m. when we'll be talking and learning about two of the great nonprofit organizations in the Verde Valley, the Friends of the Forest and the Friends of the Verde River. And my special in-studio guest will be honchos from both of those organizations. You know, Ryan, the Woman Warrior is going to like this show because she often volunteers for Friends of the Forest. So he's shaking his head because he doesn't want to talk to me today. So I'm looking forward to that show. And, of course, if you're into Democratic politics, whether local or national, tune in to my other KAZM Mellow Mountain Radio show, The Patriotic Progressive, which airs every Saturday morning from 8 to 9 a.m. on this station. But for now, thanks for listening to Red Rock Country's radio magazine. Have a great week, everyone.